Meanwhile, President Cyril Ramaphosa has brushed aside any talk of tension between ministers in his cabinet regarding the additional powers that are supposed to be given to the electricity minister, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa. He'd long been requesting this. In fact, for example, recently there was talk about a plea that he made to the ANC's National Working Committee about powers that would enable him to better work with the Eskom board. Ramaphosa has this weekend confirmed that he's in talks with the minister, but has not given a definite timeline on when these new powers will be bestowed. Let's take this up with political analyst Dr Ongama Mtimka. A very good evening to you, Doctor. Good to have your time. So, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa was appointed Minister for Electricity almost a year ago now, yet still the issue of his powers is being ironed out. How poorly does that reflect on the President, if at all?
Good evening to you and your viewers, Tembekile and Kathy. I think it's a function of many things. It's in the nature of political economic institutions to be, so you come up with a process, you test it in action, and the action itself triggers a lot more in terms of what needs to be done. Whether you're looking at proper political institutions or you're looking at businesses, it's in the nature of turnaround strategy processes to actually generate these tensions. So part of it may be a leadership issue, lack of clarity from the president. And in fact, somebody can say even the very idea of creating a ministry in his office was bound to create these tensions. But I think that now that if we accept that it is actually a thing that's here and exists, then I think it's part of the process to generate these tensions. And I don't think that they get navigated without the necessary, problems that arise on the ground.
Would it perhaps not have been prudent then to set out the functions, the powers of the new minister before making the announcement, precisely because there was always bound, it appears to be, some level of interpersonal shall we say, tension between the ministers, others feeling as though they're now going to be undermined through the introduction of a new portfolio. And now, if you've got a new minister in existence going about certain duties, yet others feel as though their toes are being stepped on, but their boss, the president, has not set out with some finality what the parameters of this relationship are. It seems like a self-engineered crisis to some degree.
To some degree it is. And you see, leading during a crisis, Tembekile, even when you have established, so for example, take out Minister Kgosientsho Ramokgopa and leave there the traditional ministers who presided over these portfolios. We had problems even then. They arose because you are working in a crisis, and crises by their nature push organizations into the realm of the ambiguous, where it is leadership that actually helps to resolve things faster rather than the structure itself and however well defined the structure is. So we saw that even before the Ministry of Electricity, there were tensions between the public enterprises as well as minerals and energy. And I'm saying that's because of a crisis. Now, when you add another ministry, those problems are exacerbated. The issue for me that I guess this is to your point, that is challenging with President Cyril Ramaphosa, is the thinking that you can introduce something new and that replaces the need for you to lead. Mm-hmm. Now, I think to his credit, Minister Ramokgopa has carved space for himself through his agency and obviously, the ear of the president, especially, for example, with respect to the roles of him and minerals and energy. I think at some stage it was bound to happen that even this crisis, even as it played out in the portfolio committee, for example, on public enterprises, was also going to play out. But nothing is going to replace effective political leadership on the part of the president. So this is while I accept that what we are seeing is a result of the fact that crises do this, we do need effective leadership from him. Now, what the reports that Minister Ramokgopa has approached, there were discussions in the NWC. That's how, unfortunately, the party political state and SOE nexus is something that's a reality of our democracy. And a significant part of it is accepted until that point where party interference begins to channel resources or to redirect resources.
So to what extent then has the political noise and this apparent interpersonal tension between the members of cabinet, the ministers, has that impacted or affected the ability to get the country out of this crisis? Because many South Africans, in fact, are less concerned about how each minister's ego may be bruised or not.
Absolutely.
What people want is uninterrupted electricity supply, which they're paying for.
Absolutely. So I think a few things to be borne in mind there. I do commend how Minister Ramokgopa, charged with the responsibility of managing the National Energy Crisis Committee resolutions in the Office of the Presidency, has been able to actually gain quick momentum to at least be applied to the crisis. I think he's had some mistakes, but I think he's been applied to the crisis. And I think that he's sent the right message to investors. Remember that the portfolios, the visibility of both ministers of mining and energy and public enterprises was compromising the extent to which investors could have confidence that there's somebody who's applying themselves to this crisis with a view to resolving it. Now, if you look at the roadshows that he's had to meet with investors, that actually, while even I was criticizing this idea of having a ministry that is set up specifically to look at this, I think as far as stakeholder management and communication, he's been able to actually set some people at ease to some degree only, and at least lend an ear that's practical to business and other stakeholders that are keen to resolve this crisis. I think that there needs to be a resolution of this current crisis with the same process that President Ramaphosa followed with Minister Kgosientsho. I see the debate raised in Parliament about the reporting requirements from ESCOM to the board, from the board to the ministry, and ultimately to Parliament. I think that we must appreciate that we're in a crisis and not be one-dimensional about the role that the electricity minister, having carved himself in, is playing to force the traditional portfolios that this entity reports to actually take action. I think that it is good, it's a good thing, Temekile, when as a result of his attempting to resolve the crisis, you've got conflict happening rather than a situation of let sleeping dogs lie and we have a business as usual approach. We can never afford a business as usual approach when it comes to the energy crisis. And I think that another issue that this raises, as per the debate in Parliament, was that whole separate governance principle of non-intervention by the political principle. And I mean, I think Minister Pravin was talking about, for example, the direct relationship that Minister Ramokgopa had with the head of generation at ESCOM. That is something we must accept, that it's part of the crisis that needs to be done. We cannot have less of it during this time, unfortunately, because we're in a crisis, and a crisis demands that we have present leadership. If people are rubbing each other the wrong way, it's tough. It's part of what needs to be done in order to resolve a crisis.
Dr. Ongama Mtimka.
And by the way, it's going to be worse. To your point, it's going to be worse if President Cyril Ramaphosa is refusing to lead and play the role that he should play of boldly taking decisions, supporting a person who's attempting to resolve the crisis the best way that they can, and then helping to ensure that the legislative framework is adapted to meet the emerging requirements.
Dr. Ongama Mtimka, good to speak to you as always. Thank you so much for your time.